You're listening to the Broadway Podcast Network.
There's a cat over here. There's a cat over there. And the wrong one died. And the wrong one died.
Welcome to The Wrong Cat Died, the podcast breakdown of the catastrophe. I'm your host, Mike Abrams, and today we have another amazing guest. I'm excited because this is going to be a slightly different view of the show that I have yet to have on The Wrong Cat Died. So he was the production stage manager on the U.S. National Tour 2 and then part of the U.S. National Tour 4. So welcome, Scott Faris, and thank you for joining me.
Hi, you're welcome. Nice to see you.
I have not had a PSM on, and I think this is a very fun angle because you are really tied to the show in a very different way than I'm Demeter or Tugger or something else. So, but we're going to get into two because that was the LA where you really got into it as putting on the show. But I always love to hear before that. What was your introduction to the show? Had you seen it before the LA company on Broadway or West End?
Yeah, no, I saw the original production on Broadway just a few weeks after it opened. I started my career as a dancer, so I was tuned into dance shows, and I had dance friends that were in the show, that a couple I'd gone to college with. So I was tuned into dance shows, but I had moved into stage management. Dancing's very hard, as you've probably heard in these interviews with cats. So a friend of mine was a PSM. I got a ticket, I saw it, and I thought, it's kind of like a Vegas show, but they're cats. So I was not bowled over. I was impressed by the production values, scenic design, lighting design, costume design. The music was, and the set design was probably the single most amazing thing about it. The music was fun, and they were cats. Who doesn't like cats? Yeah. Well, if you like cats, it's better, but.
I love that, just the nonchalant, because that's kind of how I walked in. I didn't know much about it, and my first reaction was, I feel like I'm in this junkyard. Like the set was incredible, like just the way it was immediately visible and you could kind of immerse your way in. And then I'm not a dancer. I didn't know, I was like, oh, they danced. It looked hard. But I was kind of judging the plot, what is this story? And you kind of were just like, it was fun.
Yeah. And for me, it was the show. When it opened, everybody was raving about it. So therefore, I went to see, you have to see it. And I came out and went, it was all right. I didn't hate it. I'm not being arrogant or judgmental. It just was, fine.
It was cats dancing on stage.
There were cats jumping around.
Yeah.
Yes, go ahead. Sorry.
I was gonna say, did you then it wasn't that long after that this LA company was kind of put together. So
it actually was
already a PSM.
I had been a PSM and I was touring with a show, and I was super early career. I was pretty young when I went into being a PSM. I was touring with a show in Europe, a Broadway show, Amos the Haven, and I'd been doing that show for about 4 years on and off. And I came back from this world tour and landed in New York, and that was in '83. And I came back because Chorus Line was becoming the longest show ever that summer, August of '83. Yeah. And I was in Chorus Line when I was a dancer, so I was invited to participate. So I was back in New York, and I was, just around, and people knew I was back. And the Broadway PSM for Cats was my assistant stage manager, or my stage manager on Chorus Line. And I run into him now and then, and he said, hey, he was running Cats, and it had been open for a year and some. And he said, we're planning a tour, two tours actually, and we're looking for PSMs. Are you interested? And I said, sure. And I went in and interviewed for First National, which was going to open in Boston.
Yep.
I think and this was early '83. It was going to open in the fall of '83. So I interviewed and I don't know what I did early in that year, but I heard back from him. He said, you didn't get it, but I want to keep you in mind for the Los Angeles company that we're going to start rehearsal for '84. And I'm originally from LA, and I'd been in New York for 7 years or so. And I thought, oh, okay. And I said I was interested. didn't hear from him for, almost a year. And then he called me and I went back in and interviewed and he said, yeah, I want you to do the gig. And we started rehearsal in LA in November of 84 and off we go.
So since this is a little new to me, and I think a lot of the listeners, they might know what a PSM does, but we've talked a lot about the auditions and then rehearsals. In your interview process as a PSM, how much of the cats do you need to understand? Or is it more about your experience as a PSM and here's what I'm capable of doing? But you don't need to know the show.
No, you don't need to know anything about the show. You don't have to study and research it. Your job covers a lot of areas. You are essentially, when a show opens, the director in residence. You also are the mayor of the little town that is the theater, and you then have to solve all the problems and social issues of the cast, as well as running all the technical aspects of the show. So the crew reports to you, the head carpenter, who's the boss of the crew, and you, the PSM, work together. So you are responsible for everything that happens on stage, including the quality of the show. So your background and experience and a successful track record in doing that is what gets you the job.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if you know cats or you've read T.S. Eliot's Old Possum Book of Practical. None of that matters.
It doesn't matter at all. But does it matter after? How much then do you have to learn of the show? Well,
of course, you start with the technical aspects first, so you can make sure that you know how it works. The lore of the show, as passed down from Trevor Nunn to the PSM on Broadway, you gather during rehearsal, and you absorb it. So a PSM is responsible for listening to the direction of the show, and then after the directors leave, as you can imagine, a hit show like Cats that ran for 3,000 years. Yeah. Somebody has to stay there and make sure they're still behaving in the manner that Trevor Nunn envisioned it and Gillian Lind envisioned it. So you do learn the lore of the show, the directing, and help the actors stay on track, which they love to deviate and experiment and try different things. It's just the nature of an actor.
For sure. And I think a nature of this show in particular, where it is a little looser. So is it your job to kind of go in and be like, hey, you need to be meaner to Grisabella today than you were yesterday?
I don't think you're acting like a cat out there. It's really curious. But I want to preface this with something. Trevor Nunn was the artistic director at the Royal Shakespeare Company, and that's where Cats started. Mm-hmm. And the original company in England, they had these tremendous actors, these Shakespearean actors. Judi Dench played Grisabella originally.
Before the movie, before the second time around.
Before everything.
Old Deuteronomy.
She wasn't Grisabella, it was Lorraine Page. So anyway, they had actors who had a long track record of playing Shakespeare and doing plays and developing roles. So they came with a lot of skills, and a lot of history to be able to bring to the stage. And Trevor built it into this show. So it started with this really organic group of capable actors. It then transferred to New York, and they got top-notch dancing actors. But I think the dancing evolved once it moved to the West End from whatever its original. And don't trust me on all this history, but I do know the fact is that he used a lot of really talented RSC type actors. So, and I don't know, I can't imagine the dance was as hard as it was, but maybe it's exactly the same choreography from original production too. Because one of the first Mistopheles was a great ballet dancer from the Royal Ballet, a guy named Wayne Sleep. Anyway, when you take that production and it opens in New York and you have top-notch actors, and then you go to Boston and they had a good A-list of actors, and in LA, we got some top-notch folks. But the bulk of dancers that want to do Broadway shows live in New York City area. There's more work. So LA dancers are oftentimes, they were doing videos. Music videos were really exploding in the early 80s. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of their experience was music video. Short takes, not doing a show for 2 hours, 2 hours and 40 minutes.
Live, too.
Exactly. And maintaining a character the whole time. Because the whole concept of cats, and the believability comes from the commitment of those actors acting to be cats.
Yeah.
So with different depth of experience and backgrounds coming into a show, and certainly the LA show, there were different levels of discipline and knowledge and acting skills that oftentimes had to be encouraged to stay in character and stay being a cat out there, which was kind of a classic line, Folks, you got to be cats,
You got
to be cats at the Sunday matinee as well as the Friday night and Saturday night show, because everybody's paying the same money.
So was there a note that you had to give frequently? Like, without maybe, hopefully doesn't throw any of the particular actors under the bus, but like, all right, this is, I constantly have to remind, besides you got to stay a cat, but what was the other ones?
I think now that I'm a father, a parent, the cats really prepared me for that job.
Yeah.
Because the cats cast in LA, a lot of them were young, and they'd get bored doing the same. We ran for 2 years.
Yeah.
And it was
in LA, right? Just
one theater.
It wasn't a tour. Yeah.
Schubert Theater, it became a job. You were going to work and you were doing 8 shows a week, and we did 2 shows on Saturday and 2 shows on Sunday. So no life outside, we had Sunday between shows, we would have potlucks and everybody would come to we had a rehearsal studio downstairs, and that was family time. You tried to grab time with family and friends and partners, etc. So in the length of that run, they would get bored and things would creep in to the show. And I would then have to be the kind of sheriff and come in and go, all right, you kid, I was like the teacher, hey, you kids got to stop. You got to act like cats out there. What are you doing there? So it was more reminding them that you had to stay in character, because that's how the show is conceived, and that's what you were hired to do, and that's how it was directed. And I often would say, everybody's paying the same price for a ticket, on Saturday night as well as a Saturday matinee. So don't do less, and it's hard. It was really, really hard for them. And I completely now sympathize, much more possibly than I did then, at how hard that was to do.
Yeah.
And the demand of the dancing, the physical toll and the aches and pains. And, it was a rake stage, which is not the normal design in a Broadway theater. It's a flat stage. So, and Europe and England, stages are raked. So higher at the back of the stage and lower at the front. That's hard for them to do pirouettes on, standing there.
Yeah.
It's just hard to stand there. So there were a lot of, I would say, aggravated muscle injuries because of rake and crawling around. And I heard Lee Webster say, they learned how to get up so they wouldn't hurt their backs. And so it was very hard. It was physically very demanding for them.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't know what a rake was until I started this podcast, but I was blown away that was possible. Like just the dancing on anything would have been hard. Add in these other components and it's crazy. And I do think like the 8 shows a week, 5 in a weekend, essentially, is a lot.
Insane.
But it sounds like most of what you were having to give them feedback on or reminders on were, all right, you got to fully commit to that turn or that thing, and not like I'm sitting here thinking like, all right, Buster for Jones isn't hungry today, and that's like, like these like different character choices is probably less of the problem.
Some of the principals, like the first round of principals that opened in LA were New York based. Norman Large played Gus, and he done Broadway shows. Kim Criswell was amazing. George de la Pena was from the American Ballet Theater who played Mephistopheles. So we had some ringers that they sent out who really, they knew their job and they did it consistently without question. It was the younger ones, but and that was mostly because the stage the show is staged in a way that the characters add to the design. Every scene there's a principal cat singing in the center, and then there's the kittens or the other supporting cats around completing that picture and watching them and giving focus. So it's harder for the ones watching it on the floor, not so much the ones that were singing and doing the featured bit.
It's probably something that's not dramatically changing the plot, but they're making enough liberties that as the like professionalism, you're like, all right, hold on.
Well, the rule
gotta
is
be a little bit tighter.
The rule is actually for PSMs, are they stealing focus from the intended focus? So there was a game that used to happen like later on where they had, I can't remember, it was some kind of small stuffed animal. And I can't remember if it was a cat or what it was. And they used to try and pass it around the stage and not be seen.
Wow.
That went on for quite a while. And that gave them great joy. And as long as the audience didn't see it, I just,
didn't matter too much.
Didn't look the other way.
What were some of the things as like over the 2 years of doing it as a PSM that are like memorable of either that game was a great example. Like they're throwing a stuffed animal around, hoping you don't see, or what were the things that like really stood out?
I mean, there was nothing like it in LA. Theater in LA never ran like theater in New York. So Cats was a phenomenal success. Mm-hmm. So the fact that we had these packed houses for 2 years, was amazing in itself. Because the show sat there, the set design was incorporated into the Schubert Theater, so it was closer to New York than any tour ever was.
Yeah.
We were permanently
inflatable one, or
No. We were permanently installed in there, and there were tunnels coming out from under the stage that went into what would be the orchestra pit. The orchestra played in a booth backstage. It was 2 levels, and it was huge, solid scenery, and it went out into the audience, the scenic elements onto the walls of the theater. So it was massive and it was immersive. And but that was just, I don't think that had been seen ever out there. We had our technical challenges. I remember one, and we had the ship for Growl Tiger's ship was the back wall, and it folded down hydraulics, and it just dropped down to the floor, and it was this giant deck of the ship. And one night it came part way, and while it's up, all these Siamese cats are staged behind for Genghis and his horde, and they had to climb around and climb down. So we had to play the whole show over the tire and in front of it. So that was amazing. And then I think Lee also mentioned one night the Rumpus Cat used to launch through the floor, what they call Star Trap. So there's a load of weight balanced to this actor heavier than him, and when they pulled the pin, he just shot through the floor, and the trap opened like leaves, and he would fly out and go up about 6 feet in the air and lift his legs, and he had his helmet. His mask was literally a helmet, so when he hit that thing, and he didn't come out one time. So the great Rumpus Cat, and then nothing. And I think everybody was befuddled on stage for a moment, and Monkey Strap was singing that song. And the actor sprinted from the basement, and it was not a short journey, and eventually came zipping out on the stage. Ta-da! I'm here. So those were a couple memorable mistakes and mishaps.
So when those happen for you, because like I've talked to the performers, and they're like, yeah, I ran, and then they worked on fixing it, and it was fine. But for you, are you sitting there going, oh God, I gotta my night is gonna suck now because I gotta make sure it's ready tomorrow?
Part of a stage manager's job, there's always a stage manager calling the show. That means you're sitting, and on our set, we were over the stage. We were in the set, looking through a window down onto the set. So we were off stage right then, up fairly high. So it was a ladder to get up there. So you're controlling all the lighting and sound cues and cueing orchestra and cueing anything that moves, the cat flying through the floor, the wall coming down, the tire, everything is you. So, and you're talking to all the stagehands in the building, and they're listening to you, and the fall spots are following what you say on light cues to bump up on the people at the right time. So you have to solve that when you're the calling stage manager and figure out and communicate to people what you're going to do. So it's not, and if you're not calling, so if I wasn't, and I can't remember, I don't think I was in the booth that night. I don't remember. You're just like, oh my God, what you're rushing to make sure you can aid, because oftentimes you're the one telling them what to do. You're saying, send him upside, tell him to go upstairs. You're making those calls. So it's, you're sort of flying the plane. Use that in a metaphor.
Yeah, no, it's super interesting. We're going to take a quick break and then we'll be back for more of The Wrong Cat Died. I want to fast forward to the putting on tour 4. So you obviously have a pretty good period in between. I'm sure you're doing all kinds of other shows and other stuff, but then they call you back and say, hey, we're about to go back out and we need you.
It actually went like this. As we were coming to the end of our 2-year run, the original PSM, who's now the supervisor, so he directs the companies his name's David Taylor. He directs the companies on behalf of Trevor all over the world. He did them all over the world. And which is a pretty sweet gig for his PSM to move into. He came to me and said, hey, so they did the first bus and truck during Cats, our run in LA. And one of my ASM's assistant stage managers went on that tour, and it did 1 week stops.
Yeah.
And see ya, off they went. And at the end of coming to the end of our tour, the David comes to me and says, hey, we're going to do a real bus and truck that's going to do split weeks. That means doing more than one city in a week.
Yeah.
And I just want to know if you're interested. And I said, no. I said, no way. Because I had a lot of cats by that time. I was just tired of saying, let's be cats out there, and I wanted to move forward. And he said, okay, how about this? If I can't find somebody that's right for the job, will you get it open for me and get it into a groove? Because no cat company had ever done this split week concept.
Yeah.
Will you do that and then train somebody to move up into your spot? And I said, yeah, for a lot of money, I will. And so he said, okay, I'll look for somebody else. And then they didn't find somebody else. They came back to me and I said, okay. And I signed on. So we rehearsed in New York. There were a handful of LA alums from LA Cats 2 who joined, and we rehearsed in New York City. And Lee was the dance captain, Lee Webster. And we teched in New Haven, Connecticut at the Schubert Theater. And then that was it. All the big, David was there and the lighters. By then, this was Cats 4, but they had done Cats Vienna, and I think they'd done Cats Australia, and they'd done Cats North Pole. I don't know. They were doing a lot of Cats. So
there's been a lot of versions. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
A lot of the leading team designers, directors, said it would not join. So you'd have the associate designers. So they were all with us in New Haven. I think we did 3 nights. We hit the road and we went to Buffalo, New York. And that's where we started that tour. Kevin was on that tour. Leslie Traer was on that tour. There were a whole bunch of people. Nancy Melius was on that tour. I haven't scanned all the people you've interviewed, but it was a good
amount of them. Yeah.
Yeah, it was a good core group. And my task was to get us through the first few split weeks. So we started off week in Buffalo planning it, and then we jumped somewhere and had to do 3 nights and then shut it down and move it. And once that was running smoothly and we proved the concept could work, then I, signed off and jumped out the Cats train.
Yeah. You didn't want to be on that bus going every other 3 days, 4 days to a new place.
That's I was looking to move on to bigger and better things. And I did. I actually, on tour, I left them we were in Fort Worth, and I interviewed for a Broadway show that was an out-of-town tryouts. I went over and met the producers at Dallas, and I got hired and got my next show. So Cats has been very good to me. I'm not going to slam it. And the general managers, do you know how this concept of, producers and general managers,
I have a little bit, but give the full rundown, because I don't know if everyone who listens to this knows I think they know the story of Cats and the performers and some of this, but I'm not sure everyone knows how the behind the scenes works.
It's sort of the hierarchy of any Broadway show. As the producer is the person who gathers the money. It may not always be their money. It might be other investors. They used to call them investors and angels, but now they're all producers. And then the producer hires a general manager, and that general manager then opens all the accounts and spends the money, regulates the spending of the money. And they hire then everybody else. They contract directors and designers and company managers and production stage managers and ASMs, et cetera. So the general managers for Cats were a very established, very classy operation, and they were called Gatchel Newfield. They had a lot of, and most general managers have multiple shows. So Gatchel Newfield ended up specializing in all the Andrew Lloyd Webber shows. After that, they did many productions. So they were great people to work for. And I worked for those folks and for years afterwards, decades. So
yeah. So you got in LA in their world, and then they're like, all right, we've got somebody good. Come do this, come do that.
Yeah,
like they know your ability.
That's how you get work. It's all, you're as good as your last job, they say in theater. And so you do your best. And I've had relationships with them for the 40 years since.
And how else has Cats really impacted your life? It sounds like it's more than just, there's this in the beginning of your career, but what else?
Here's a fun thing that I thought of while we were talking. John Napier was the scenic designer. He was this genius English guy, and he designed first Equus, which was a famous Broadway show in London that came to Broadway, but then he did Cats and Les Miserables and Starlight Express and Miss Saigon, and he was responsible for these gigantic sets.
Yeah.
And when Cats hit L.A., everybody saw it. Spielberg saw it, and Lucas saw it, and so John would come back occasionally, and he said, "I'm here. I'm working on. I'm meeting with Steven Spielberg." I go, "Wow!" And he'd come to the theater because he was from London, and he'd come out, and he has a show, and he didn't know anybody out there, so he'd come to the theater, hang out, watch the show, and we go have beers after. He said, "I'm meeting with Spielberg because I'm going to do this film at Disney that Spielberg's producing." Coppola's directing, Lucas is writing, and it was called Captain EO, starring Michael Jackson. And they want me to design the sets. So he came out, he'd come hang out at the theater. And then that led him to doing scenic design for Spielberg on a film called Hook, Robin Williams as Peter Pan. And so John was just killing it. And then I did my next show. I did that Broadway show that I told you about after Cats 4. But then I came back to LA to do Les Miserables, the same theater as the Cats was in, Schubert. John Napier was a scenic designer. And so John came out, we hung out together. And the next thing I hear that John Napier is going to design and direct Siegfried and Roy at the Mirage Hotel, the new Mirage Hotel in Las Vegas. And it's going to be the biggest, most expensive hotel ever built. And John's going to direct it. Now, John is not a director by trade. And I said, wow, that'd be fun. That sounds fun. And they didn't have a production stage manager. So they called me because the designers, sound designers, lighting designers, were all, Cats related or Les Mis related or whatever. So they hired me, and I went up there and did the show, and it was the biggest show I'd ever done in my life. It had 25 tigers, an elephant, a horse. It had a lion, a panther, and it had more Very lights, which are the movable early intelligent lights that they used in rock and roll. More Very lights than any show ever, and winch-controlled automation. It was insane, 70 people in the cast. So I did that, and I ended up being the associate or assistant director, and that just put me on the map. And then I started getting asked to direct big shows after that. And I did giant shows, all because of knowing John Napier, working on Cats, and then moving to Les Mis. And then it set my career in a direction I never imagined. So my specialty has been giant arena shows and Las Vegas spectacles. I've done about 9 of them now.
Yeah. So you went from small cats to bigger cats to now spectacles.
I think I went to fairly big Cats in LA to movable Cats and Cats 4, and then to bigger shows.
Yeah.
But I do like a simple Broadway show. Technology doesn't make a show great.
Yeah.
And I think the essence of Cats, people ask me, I was doing another show at Schubert where we were sitting there, could have been Les Mis, and it was maybe 5 years after Cats, and there was an article in Time magazine about how much money Cats had made around the world. And at that time, it was $950 million.
Yeah.
And I think it was the 90s, and I just, it's staggering the success and the appeal of Cat. And Andrew's music, I've done I did another Andrew Lloyd Webber original musical later on in my career, and I've been around and watched him work and watched these shows develop. You know, you never talk about him on this podcast, really, I don't think, but he did contribute something to this thing.
A ton.
And the magic of Trevor's direction, and Gillian, really, you have to give credit to Gillian Lynn. And I've heard you ask the actors, what is your character, and what do they tell you about your character? Mm-hmm. And I think they would use the attributes of the person they hired initially and let them develop these characters, as well as and Trevor, RSC, the Royal Shakespeare Company, all his work is based on textual analysis, studying the text of the play. So you can imagine studying those poems by T.S. Eliot and bringing everything he can out of that. So there was a real foundation from Trevor there for acting, but Gillian would then build that into movement, and it's undeniable her movement is what really made the show what it is.
I think the reason it's so successful over the years, I've kind of have two theories of why it sustains. I think one is what you just said, is the three of them together really mesh their talents into this powerhouse. Like, you've got someone who's taking poems and kind of understanding how to craft that into a story. You've got a composer putting incredible music behind it to make multiple memorable moments, but also it changes, it's not like it's one sound the whole way through. Each character has a very distinct sound, and you go through a journey, and then you've got a choreographer adding to those stories through movement. And if you're missing one of those three, it probably doesn't work. Maybe it goes okay, but you really need all three of those. And then I think the part that helps it is because it's such a big cast and it is so loose that the performers can have a little bit of interpretation, which I think makes more authentic performances, because you can bring a little of yourself into it. And I think the way audiences can see themselves in it. That's the key to success.
That's the key to success, is with the long-running shows, allowing performers to have their input into that role. So the actors that played those parts originally might have been in different shapes, but as the show evolved and developed into a really successful machine, they knew that the casting folks and the directors and the production supervisor, et cetera, knew that Cassandra needed to be tall and thin, and Victoria needed to be more petite, and Chillabub should be tiny, and Rumpelteazer and Mungo Jerry had to be small persons with acrobatic skills, and the Munkustrap had to be an imposing character, and Gus had to have the big baritone. Those became very specific requirements for those roles. And the other thing you have to acknowledge too, John Napier, the scenic designer, designed those costumes.
Yes,
he designed those costumes
and the set and everything. Yeah,
but the costumes were hand painted, hand built unitards that were sensational, and they were so expensive. Each one of those unitards that they wore were incredibly constructed.
Yeah, you get immersed into it. I think that's the whole production. And then I think as an audience member, I've talked to a lot of fans who are the super fans, and they're always, they can feel something from it. And a lot of times it's a recognition of, I can see myself in character X or character Y. Mm. And that doesn't always happen in every show. There's plenty of shows where I watch and I'm like, I don't relate to these people. I'm just following the story. And whereas Cats, there's probably one for you.
That's a good point. And everybody can decide what cat is their favorite, and they can also attribute characteristics to that cat on stage.
Yeah.
Connected to their, as you said, their own life experience or their cat or their pet or whatever it is. And man, people like cats, and I thought, oh, yeah, it's all right. It's like a Vegas show, but you cannot deny the impact that it's made to worldwide,
and to so many other shows. I mean, I think you look at some of the stuff that happens after, and it's clear that it was the success of Cats that influenced some of those decisions.
Cat influence. Yeah. For me, it was a really foundational experience in my PSM career, because it challenged me in so many ways in and demanded that I use skills that I needed to develop as a PSM to manage people, we used to have, to keep the show tight, to run the technical aspect of it, the performance tight, and also to keep them happy. We used to do silly things prior to the show backstage to cheer them up. We'd have contests. I got these recordings of these old TV theme songs I'd play over the announcement, and then the PA backstage. So we did anything we could to keep the mood light.
Yeah. I think there's some foundation parts of your career that you get to build early on that really help in the later parts, because you get to almost experiment with a show, with the role, and then that helps you as you evolve into these bigger, Vegas shows.
I think that 2-year experience in LA and Cats 2, when we set out on the tour in Cats 4, I can't remember, it was early. I don't know if it was the first city or the second city. I said, I'm going to hold a meeting and I'm going to tell them the rules of life in Cats. And I think I was pretty much a hard ass. And I said, look, this is how it works. This is what you do. This is how you take care of yourself. If you can't do this, you have to call us. And I laid out all these things. And I believe what I heard, and that show ran for, I don't know how many years, over 10 years.
A while, yeah.
That it ran smoothly. And people knew what was expected of them. And that's what I was trying to do. I wanted these young, because we had even younger actors on Cats 4 than in LA. I wanted them to know what was expected of them, that they were coming onto a professional show and they needed to, if they did this, their life would be easier. Their lives would be much simpler.
Yeah.
And I think it kept a happy company. I had great relationships with all those folks. And I was sad to leave. And I remember we had a reunion in New York. I don't know when it was, and I don't know how many year reunion it was, but it was a big reunion. And we had all the LA based folks were online, and we were in, I think we were in like Sardi's or something in New York City, and we all met and taught, and it was just great. So I have very, very fond memories and strong connections, although I don't see a lot of those folks anymore.
Yeah. I think that's a cool part about a tour or just even a show like this, where it is a family-based story, and I think you start to see a community from the production.
Kevin and Leslie, are a perfect example of that. They got together on that. Kevin, I worked with later on. I hired him as a PA for me on Les Miserables, but we've been friends ever since. And I'm the head of stage management at USC School of Dramatic Arts in LA, and Kevin comes and talks to my class, seniors, every year, and I bring in other professionals that I've met in my career.
That's awesome.
So they give back, and they're all happy to give back, and I'm trying to point these kids out the door to find work.
Yeah. Well, let's do a little rapid fire Cats here.
Can I tell you one thing? I just remembered.
Yeah, let's hear. Well,
I just
remember the story.
Acting. You asked in the podcasts I've listened to, the few I have listened to, you ask questions oftentimes about acting and direction. You can imagine that Gus was heavily directed, Necrel Tiger Scene and Jelly Lorem, and there was a lot of very specific direction about how they behaved and what they were. There weren't huge backstories like you're looking for, but there was things that other people may have alluded to, like Syllabub being shell-shocked a bit from having had an encounter with, or Demeter shell-shocked from an encounter with McCavity, and Syllabub had this connection to the spiritual world, Deuteronomy, and the heavy side. So there were concepts that were introduced and shared. So people were told that, but I don't know how far that passed down after my company and when they went out in the world.
I don't think I've not gotten a perfect answer on that of like there is a little bit of lore, but the backstories do seem looser and probably intentional. But part of me is convinced that Trevor or somebody in the early on was like, no, I thought through this whole thing, whether it was said or documented. I'm sure
there's
it was
no
all
question.
thought out.
He came to the LA company, so he couldn't make our first rehearsal. He sent a video to us, which was unbelievable to listen to. Everybody was riveted. It was about him talking for 15, 20 minutes about the show and the concept. Jillian did all the work in LA with the supervisor, David Taylor from the New York company. And then Trevor came out I think we were in tech. Jillian had to go and Trevor came out and he put his special brand, and there's nothing that was accidental that he shared. He had dug into this. He knew exactly what the relationships were, and he would share those. I have to say, sadly, I can't remember every detail, but there was certainly a structure of relationships that he would share with the cast. And like I said, how long did that stick, and how long was that shared as companies went on and replacements came in? It's who knows.
Yeah, I think this what makes the show interesting, though. Like there's some deviation, but not so far that it changes the story or the show, but enough that it adds to an entire debate about this relationship or that relationship between different performances.
And that's what you caught. It's that mystery, and that's what allows people to possibly impose their own theories and then feel more connected to the piece.
Yeah. Okay, let's do a couple quick ones. If you could be in the show, who would you want to perform as?
Kind of like Bustopher Jones.
Bustopher Jones.
He was fun.
Okay.
I'd have to gain more weight, but I would like to.
Just put the big jacket on. You'll be fine. Yeah. Favorite and least favorite cat in the show? Like personality, character-wise.
Favorite? I think Gus was probably my favorite. Least favorite, possibly one of the irritating kittens, or maybe Skimble. Skimble Shanks, and his bossy officiousness.
I like the can't remember. It's a very PSM answer. It's like the ones that just cause chaos,
That's right. That is definitely a PSM answer.
What about favorite song from the show?
I think Gus is the cat at Gus the theater cat is a beautiful tune. Really, really a beautiful song. And Memory is, of course, the one that made the hit, and everybody knows, but
of course,
Gus is just a lovely, beautiful tune with a heart and lyrics. And I would go towards that.
Okay. My fun one is, which cat do you think would make the best PSM?
Yeah. Skimble, but I don't think he'd be loved.
Yeah.
I think Munkus Trap.
Yeah.
Munkus
those are the
Trap
two I was thinking about.
Munkus Trap for sure, but Skimble he'd be the assistant stage manager, Skimble, because he'd check all the details. But Munkus Trap would be running the place in a calm, gentler, but more benevolent way.
Yeah. And Tugger would be the worst.
Tugger's a disruptor, playful. And it's funny because the actors who play those parts are that oftentimes.
Yeah. All right. So the most important question. I've argued that I don't think it should be Grisabella. So I want to hear, do you want to defend Grisabella, or do you want to pick a different Jokel choice?
No, I'm not going to defend Grisabella. I think she got the pity choice,
Okay, I love it.
I think definitely Gus. He's dignified. He's not asking for anything. He's not calling for favors, attention, special treatment. He deserved it, without question, in my mind. She's, wandering around stage, all pathetic. Come on.
I could not agree more. I'm totally with you. I think it's a different, it's there. I think we can do that. I think you can, as a PSM, you one day should just call a different cat up to the harness and just say, hey, we're going to turn your mic off.
Now
we're going to put you on.
That could have been fun, that we would pick a different cat every show.
It's my dream right now, is I want to have somebody do that. And I think it still works because you can still sing Memory. Yeah, you can still sing Memory. You still get to belt it out. You still get that redemption story, but then you vote with a who brought it tonight and just bring somebody up to the episode layer at the end.
I think you're onto something. I'm
so
going to subscribe.
If you know people that can make this happen, please put me in touch.
When the next revival happens, I think that has to be part of it. I might work on it then. Not as PSM.
Yeah.
I would direct it, but yeah. Good.
That's
good call.
That's my goal. That is what all I'm working for now. I feel like every time I record, I'm just like slowly trying to put it in the ear of someone's like, oh, I know somebody doing a regional production. Call me. I'm ready. I'll call you. You can direct. That's my goal, is I want a audience vote different every night cat choice.
I'm with you. I'm on board 100%.
Amazing. Well, this has been so fun. It's such a different angle to hear how it's, really catapulted your career and what it did
Yeah.
for you, but then also your experience just in such all the madness so intimately.
I know I'm friends with people for life. Everybody worked hard, and it was an amazing experience. And I don't see many of them. I am a director now. And for people that know me and go, what the hell happened to Scott Faris? I do have a website, scottfarisdirector.com, and they can go,
Okay.
they can look and go, oh, you did that? That's what happened to you. So, yeah, that's all I got.
We'll link it and share it out so everyone gets to see all the stuff you've gotten to do after Cats too.
Yeah, been good.
Awesome. Well, this has been so fun. I really appreciate you coming on.
You're welcome. I had a blast. It just brings back so many terrific memories, and I might have been miserable on some days at the Schubert Theater sketch too. But looking back on it now, it's great fondness, appreciation for everything that I experienced and the people I met and worked with.
It's always a grind during, but it's always fun to look back.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, it's great to have you on. So thank you. And thanks everyone else for listening to this episode of The Wrong Cat Died, the podcast breakdown of the catastrophe. To follow along, you can subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere else you listen to podcasts. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and Threads at The Wrong Cat Died, or check out our website, thewrongcatdied.com.